Built in 1898 by Harry and Susan Dubois, the Dubois Pioneer home is one of the oldest surviving historic homes in Palm Beach County. Inspired by Harry's childhood at the Jersey Shore, the House on the Hill is an example of Victorian shingle architecture. Standing atop a Native American mound, the home was originally a one-story structure that was later expanded to accommodate a growing family. Withstanding numerous hurricanes, this unique and well-loved homestead is rich in both historic and archaeological value.
My great-grandfather Harry, who's pictured in a number of the places, was truly the pioneer. He came down as a 16-year-old boy from New Jersey and saw Florida for what it was when it was a natural, no bridges, and he became in love with Florida and settled here.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the family and the house. I like to always start at the pictures because it has a little story that's endeared to me. This is Harry and Susan Dubois. It's pronounced Dubois and not Dubois. Initially, he's from Huguenot descent and of course would have been Dubois. However, when his family came over in 1660, they landed in New Paltz, New York, upper state New York. And at the time it wasn't New York yet, it was New Amsterdam. And so because they were so heavily persecuted by Louis XIV, they disavowed that Huguenot heritage and that Dubois pronunciation, and it became Dubois. He was a Jersey Shore boy. He came down here and he worked at Merritt Island, north of here, in one of the citrus groves owned by his cousin. When that grove went out of business, he went back to New York where he was living at the time, and he's working in some of the factories with a lot of pollution and he didn't like it. He didn't like what it was doing to his lungs, didn't like the weather in New York. He said, I'm moving back to Florida. So he moves back to Florida, and until about 1894, from 1892 to 1894, he ran a little fishing boat out here, and the Indian River Steamship Company would come into the inlet, and he would take supplies to the Celestial Railroad, which stopped next door here. If you're local, it's Sunny Sands. It's over there, a big controversial project that's going on now.
I do not usually get very political here on this channel, but if you would like to sign the petition, I have put the link down below in the description.
And then from there, I'll go to Lake Worth Lagoon, and it would go into his to Flagler, who's building up Palm Beach with all the hotels at the time. When that went out of business in 1894, the railroad did. He went to business with the Jupiter Inlet Life Saving Station. Are any of you local? Okay, native. So you know where Carlin Park is in the old Jupiter Inlet Life Saving Station. And Captain Carlin was the keeper there. He used to be the assistant keeper at the lighthouse, and then he went into the Inlet Life Saving Station. They had the 13 stations along the Florida coastline. So Captain Carlin's wife had the inn that was where Susan stayed, and I'll go back more into Susan. But Harry decides he's going to start. He would pick pompano and different kinds of fish to take to Flagler over for his restaurants, for his hotels. He would do shipwrecks because this is so close to the Atlantic coast and we had so many shipwrecks. He would salvage material, and he did that for a long while until 1896 when the Inlet Life Saving Station closed. Well, around 1897, Susan comes into town.
I knew my great-grandmother Susan in her elderly years. She lived to be 103. My great-grandmother, she was the school teacher that had just come into town, and the ratio of men to women was 5 to 1, and I think he knew he only had one chance at bat, so on their blind date, so to speak, he proposed to her, and that's how this house came about. And my grandfather was born 9 months and 13 days after they got married, and I knew my grandfather very well. I was named for him.
Susan comes here from Kansas, like I said, on the train by herself with her sister. Her father and her brother are already in Lake Worth, and they're clearing land, and they're also clearing land for Flagler, who's making the Royal Poinciana Hotel. So I brought a picture of, this is Susan's brother on the steamship here that he invented, and her father in the front. He married the first teacher in Palm Beach County, Hattie Gale, who was 16 years old. But this is their clearing land for the Royal Poinciana Hotel. The story on this is, we had a grand opening in 2016. I had the last tour in the bedroom. And this elderly gentleman stays in, and he's just walking around looking at things and not saying anything. I said, can I answer a question for you, or is there something I can give you for information? He said, no, but I have something for you. And he bent over in his little plastic tote bag that he's carrying around, and he takes out these pictures and says, these are my grandparents, and I want them to come home. They've been on my mantle for 30 years, and I want them to come back to their house. So I always get a little tear in my eye, and John Alden donated the pictures. That was one of the grandchildren of the second son. He donated this piano that he learned to sing a cappella on, and he also donated this desk of his father's. This is his father, Henry, the second child of Harry and Susan. He was born in 1901, and this is his 1919 diploma from Palm Beach High School, which is now Dreyfus. So they had to go down and stay with Susan's parents in order to get a high school education, because Jupiter only went through 10th grade. And this is the way they got to school, on the school boat. So the school boat would come and pick them up here at the bottom of the stairs, and they would go whichever area of the school they were going to. This is the Cabot Tree over at, do you know where the train station is over on alternate A1A, the yellow train station? That's where the school was, where the kids used to go to the tree. A little bit about the floors in the house. It is a Jersey Shore style of house. There's no insulation. It's all called Dade County pine. It's got upright members but no insulation in the walls. And because there's no insulation, it's a Jersey Shore style home, it's got to be subject to wind here like it is there. So they said, if you have straight up and down beadboard and no insulation, the wind hits it, it's going down, right? If you put diagonal beadboard, more footage against the wind, resistance against the wind, so they have diagonal beadboard. The floors are 125 years old. They're tongue and groove flooring, again, the Dade County pine. It is assembled with the tongue and groove, and of course the nails go through, so you see very long planks, more than you usually do in a floor. Long planks and no exposed nails. That sap that's inside soft pine gets hardened. It's all the way throughout the board, and it hardens to like a rosin coating. Once that heals, it is impervious to water and to termites. Nothing penetrates it. They didn't even have tools that could drill into it afterwards. So once this is sealed off, very, very good for the pioneer houses to have, so they all had it. Bad part is you have a fireplace or something like this that was installed later for a renter, gets a little spark on it. It's basically like taking a tanker of gasoline and throwing it on, and this house would just literally implode. A little pinwheel or yo-yo quilt that Susan and her daughter made.
All right, so we are in the dining room. The house was basically 2 rooms, and they were multi-purpose rooms. That was bedroom, that was dining room, that was living room, that was everything. We have it set up as specific living room and dining room. First thing you probably notice in here is this very large wall hanging, which is the Dubois family tree. Quilt, which was made in 1998 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the house. We are now commemorating the 125th anniversary of the house. Same house. This has lasted for a long time. So here are Harry and Susan at the heart of their family tree. There are 4 children, John, Henry, Anna, their only daughter, and Neil, in order. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren as they existed in 1998. So John decided he was going to take over his father's enterprises. He began with the fernery. He was the one who supervised the excavation of the shell mound.
You are standing on what the archaeologists called a monumental mound. This is man-made. It was made for practical reasons, social reasons, ritual reasons, it was well over 700 feet. It went way that way, it went way this way, built between 600, 1200. What I say, AD, CE is the current correct usage. It is built of oyster shells because this area, keep in mind, you have to reconfigure this area in your brain. It was a beautiful, beautiful area. You had access to the ocean. You had access to our wild and scenic river that came right down along the base of this mound.
This is a picture of John. This is the eldest son, 17-year-old man, oversaw the excavation of the mound. In 1914, the property was mortgaged, and the bank called the mortgage, and the family didn't have the money. In 1914, cars are starting to come into the area. They need material for a roadbed. The family sold this off for a roadbed. A lot of this mound is under Silver Beach Road down in Lake Park. Some of it's on the Beeline Highway going out to Indiantown.
And was able to salvage quite a few artifacts during that period of time. He also ran a business here on the Shell Mound at Dubois Park. For 25 cents you could come in and spend the day at the park. You could fish, you could rent boats, you could swim, and he had a restaurant.
This is John and Bessie's restaurant. So this is John, the eldest son, and his wife Bessie. This is their restaurant. This was down by where the marina is today. It was open from 1926 to 1942. They had to close the restaurant because of war, and a couple of reasons. The U-boats were sitting offshore here, and they had had blackouts in Jupiter because if the lights shined off the shore, it would silhouette the merchant ships, and the U-boats could pick them off. So there was a blackout in Jupiter, and then there was also shortages and rationing of sugar. So that was one of the other reasons. The restaurant closed. Here's their menu.
Henry did ferns. There were ferns, people say, what do you mean by ferns? Asparagus ferns were a big commodity here in Jupiter around the turn of the century. They would be shipped north to floors in New York and New Jersey to use in floral arrangements and train stations and hotel lobbies. Anna became a postmaster, don't call it the postmistress, down at Lake Park. It's about 10 miles south of here. She was a woman who scandalized Jupiter in the 1920s by being the first woman to wear a one-piece bathing suit instead of the big two-piece with, long pants and long sleeves. She was a bit of a rebel, and I think I would have liked her. Before she got married, she not only got her high school diploma, she went to college. She went up to what was then Florida State College for Women in Tallahassee. It's now Florida State University. And she liked to say she went on honey money because one of the other family enterprises was honey. By 1918, Harry Dubois was shipping 90,000 pounds of honey a year. That's a lot of honey. Why so much? World War I. They were rationing sugar, but they weren't rationing honey. So anybody with a sweet tooth was turning to honey. He was making a lot of money. Neil took over the honey making business. Harry died prematurely. He died in 1924. He was only 54 years old. Such an energetic, entrepreneurial man. But he had a disease called pernicious anemia. So the glass has slumped over the years. Those are two of these original 1898 frames. The house has withstood 65 hurricanes and stood for 125 years. So as you can imagine, quite a few of the windows have been broken over those years due to hurricanes, accident, vandalism, unfortunately. So it's really nice to have a couple of those original frames. Underneath the pie safe, every leg would be sitting in a shallow dish of kerosene. That kept ants, roaches, and other crawling insects from coming up and getting into the food. You had to learn to deal with bugs in those days, or you simply moved back north pretty quickly. You couldn't take it. If you saw the brooms on the outside of the front door, those were not for sweeping the porch. They were for sweeping bugs off your clothing so you didn't bring them in with you. This is the kitchen from about the 1920s. The original kitchen, as you probably heard, was the size of a large closet, separate from the main house. Always in those days because of risk of fire. And let's face it, you want to keep the heat of cooking out of the main house back in those days, a long time ago. This was a kitchen that was built in the 1920s. It was large. It was attached to the house, right next to the dining room. A lot more convenient. But when the Loxahatchee Guild, they had to close down the house in 2008 and do a massive $500,000 restoration on it. The old house was showing its wear and they needed to bring it back to its former glory. And the kitchen did not survive, so this is a reproduction of that original kitchen following the floor plan of the original structure. The Loxahatchee Guild paid for this refurnishing, paid for the Dade County yellow pine floors that you see here. Remember that Lynn, I'm sure, told you that those trees cannot be harvested now. They are preserved in Dade County, what few are left. So the Loxahatchee Guild, who wanted a genuine Dade County yellow pine floor or something equivalent, ended up buying used planks from a place up in New York, up north, and they brought them all down here, recut the planks to match the way the pioneers cut their planks, had enough wood to floor not only this kitchen, but the kitchen at the Tyndall Pioneer home, which is across the inlet on Lighthouse property, and had the same rebuilt kitchen problem.
The story with this too is this is donated by the local historical society, and they found it on eBay. Purchased it. It was up in Jacksonville. They sent the guys up there with the truck to pick it up. When the guys got there, the lady unplugged it, took her groceries out, and said, "Cheers."
She was still using it.
Still using it. There's been some archaeological digs done in the area, and here's some of the things that they found. This is a pottery shard. One of the other things that they found on the mound were these. These are carved bones, and these pins were used by the men. They wore their hair up in buns, and they would pin their hair up. Here's some of the other things that they found. These are trading beads. So these are glass beads that shows the European evidence in this area. This particular one is extremely rare. This is called a chevron bead. This is Venetian glass. It was made with 3 layers with these chevron patterns cut in them. This bead was found very close to right out the back door there. Only 12 sites in the New World have. Bar building way over there with the ramp on it, that's the pineapple shack. That's where Harry, when he was processing pineapples down in this pineapple patch, that's where he lived. He lived in a loft up there and processed the pineapples down there. When he got married and was building this house, he brought that house over here, and that's where he and Susan lived while they were building this home. That's just recently gone under a restoration, and we hope to open it as a museum to show some of the artifacts. This room was added in 1903 when they did the second story. So this room was added. The armoire in the corner was made by another pioneer in this area, Mr. Eicher. Mr. Eicher ran the general store here in Jupiter. And if you're familiar with Sawfish Bay over here, you know where the train depot is? That little white house, that's Mr. Eicher's house. It's not open to the public, but maybe one day. And I think probably my favorite thing in this entire house is this. This is Harry and Susan's wedding picture. This is a copy. It was donated by the family. It's a little unusual in that the groom is standing in front of the bride. Well, the story is, when they were married, there was no photographer in Jupiter. A little while later, an itinerant traveling photographer comes into town. Susan finds out and says to her husband, "I want a wedding picture." And there's only one answer from a good husband is, "Of course, dear, yes, anything." The problem is, this is after they've been married for some time, and Susan was very pregnant. So the photographer very cleverly put her in the back and used the bouquet to hide the pregnancy. But she got her wedding picture.
Grandmother Bessie loved to do the oral history of this area, and she had written her books on the various subjects, the history of the Loxahatchee, the Jupiter Lighthouse. But I think she really got more of a kick out of going around and presenting the photographs and her talks with my grandfather to the local school kids and so forth. So, you know, it was a little bit of it rubbed off on me, I suppose. I was actively involved in the Historical Society here in the early 2000s.
I am Nikki, and this is Nick's Picks. Click here to subscribe. YouTube thinks you'll like this video. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Make sure to leave a comment, and we'll see you real soon. If this content interests you, you might like to see my next video on the pineapple plantation packing house